what was like the first thing you did? Like once obviously you got to go into the doctor and get all the diagnosis and hear all the things that they say. And, you got that information now. You say you're a researcher. What did you do after that?
Well, to be very honest and candid, the first thing I did was open a bottle of wine. I'd been sat there. I took my partner along, despite the fact that she was only a couple of weeks out of her own lung surgery and still very much in recovery. We had 2 little boys at that time, 1 and 3 at home. We also had my in-laws over from the US. They're based in Texas at the moment. They're Mexican originally by background. They were over helping us through my partner's lung cancer journey. So they looked after the kids. My partner came with me to the oncology meeting. And the first thing we did was sit in the car, discuss what was going to happen next, talk about what happens if I die, what happens if this. Can I write down all of the passwords for our Wi-Fi and for all of the appliances in the house, sort of thing, was the first question from my partner. Then it moved on to, okay, how does it work in terms of finances? And then it was open a bottle of wine and commiserate life, essentially. About 48 hours after that, it was, okay, now that's over and done with. Now I've grieved the life that I had. What do I do next? And I very quickly started researching. And the thing that came out of it, especially through some of the mainstream media now, is things like Thomas Seyfried. I don't know if you've come across Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He's a researcher based at the University of Boston in the US who looks at metabolism and how metabolism affects cancer. And I would like to say a big shout out to people like Stephen Bartlett, who is the Diary of a CEO podcaster, who he brought on Thomas Seyfried. It was a very controversial interview at that point in time. He got in all sorts of trouble and he got fines all over the place for it. But he kept the interview up. And as part of my research, I came across it. And that very first little twig of information, I kind of went, actually, this makes a lot of sense. There's little things in this, like I went in for a PET scan. A PET CT scan essentially is where they pump your body full of a radioactive sugar, trace where the sugar goes, because cancer likes sugar in a lot of instances. Not all, by any means, but some instances. And in my instance, I had a glycolytic cancer, as in one that liked glucose, that liked sugar. So a lot of what he said sort of twigged off these little bits in my head that I went, there's something to this actually. Some of it doesn't apply, some of it's a bit hocus pocus, some of it's a bit this, a bit that. But in pretty much every major breakthrough in the entire history of science, it always starts off as a bit of hocus pocus, a bit of woo-woo, a bit of, witch doctory, a bit of all these sorts of things. And it's a case of having a little bit of faith in that person, having a faith in their research, and then having faith in yourself in order to be able to follow some of it through. And that's the first route I went down, was to start scratching the surface of these fringe bits of science, looking into all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, from dog dewormers to horse medications to all the fun stuff you find on all these internet forums. Half of it is snake oil. Half of it is not worth the idea and the thought of it. But in order to make sure there was no stone unturned, I had to look into them. I had to go and find the actual research. I had to look at what really makes a difference and what works from an actual science standpoint. And I took the point of view that evidence-based medicine really means looking at the evidence for all options, not just looking at the standard of care, not just looking at chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and radiotherapy, but really working out what was out there and why it was out there. And then that very quickly led me on to things like next generation sequencing. So I had the biopsy of my tumor, so the piece of my tumor taken. It was sent off to a lab through a company called Astron Health, and they actually did a full breakdown of the genetics of my cancer. That, then the output of, allowed me to look at which medications, both standard of care medications, so specifically which chemotherapies, which immunotherapies, etc., would work for my specific instance, as well as looking at supplements and looking at off-label medications. And when I say off-label, I mean things like aspirin is classed as an off-label medication. On the label, it is there for pain. Off-label, it is there to help reduce cancer proliferation. It's been known for many years to have many anti-cancer effects. It's published in multiple different places. It's got a phase 3 trial proving which, etc. But its primary use is not for cancer. It's for pain. So that is classed as off-label. And I came up with a very long list of off-label medications, everything from metformin, a diabetes drug known to lower the levels of blood sugar, etc. One of the most widely profiled drugs on earth. It has a trial that proves that it works against cancer and has roughly a 30-something% increased survival rate overall. And I started to piece together these little bits and pieces of science and information that exist out there in the world that are proper proven pieces of medical science that have trials to back them. They are the sorts of things that our medical system is based on. It's just at this moment, they are not used within the standard medical system.